Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into the incredible world of Grecian mythology.
Absolutely. And this deep dive is custom tailored just for you, based on that great stack of sources you shared.
Our mission today, then, is to kind of navigate these rich texts together.
Yeah, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights.
We want to give you a really clear understanding of the main figures, the big stories, the concepts.
Without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Right. Think of it like getting the highlights reel.
Exactly. Plus, maybe a bit of the director's commentary on these foundational myths. Find some surprising facts along the way.
Sounds good. So we're going straight to the heart of it, starting where these sources usually do, the very beginning.
That's right. Back to the most ancient beings, what the sources often call the primeval deities.
We're talking figures like Uranus and Gaia.
Uranus and Gaia, yeah.
Yeah.
Heaven and earth, essentially.
So Uranus is the heaven, the sky, light and air. How did the Greeks actually see him according to these texts?
Well, the sources link him with, purity, intense heat, light, even omnipresence, like being everywhere. He is the sky dome.
Okay. And then the contrast is Gaia.
Gaia, yeah. The firm, flat earth beneath. Life-sustaining.
She sounds incredibly important.
Oh, absolutely. The sources really emphasize her as the great mother goddess.
Worshipped everywhere.
Widely revered, temples in pretty much every city.
Yeah.
It reflects that deep connection the Greeks felt to the land, right, as the source of life.
And it's interesting that the sources mention the flat earth idea right there with her.
It is, yeah. Circled by Oceanus, the world ocean, it gives you a sense of that early cosmology.
So you've got sky, earth. What about below? The
Yeah.
darkness.
Right, below there's Erebus, described as this mysterious, gloomy world.
And his sister, Nyx, night.
Nyx, exactly, night. Worshipped with real solemnity, the sources say. And Uranus is sometimes linked to Nyx, too, as the source of light contrasting her darkness.
It sounds very fundamental, almost like elemental building blocks of the cosmos.
Precisely. These are the absolute basics. And then, from Uranus and Gaia, the next generation arrives.
Powerful, often terrifying figures.
Mm-hmm. You mean the giants and the titans?
Yes. What's the story there? The sources bring in the giants pretty early.
They do, yeah. Sometimes linking them to things like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, that kind of raw power.
And some born for Uranus's blood falling on Gaia. That's pretty intense.
It's a very visceral origin story, isn't it? And then you have figures like the hecatomb chairs.
The 100-handed ones, 50 heads. They sound like pure chaos.
They really do. Like raw subterranean forces capable of shaking the whole universe.
And there are other specific giants mentioned too, like Otis and Ephialtes.
Right, sons of Poseidon. Grew huge, super fast, tried to storm Olympus, ended up imprisoned in Tartarus. Tydeus is another earthborn one mentioned.
So the giants seem tied to that raw, chaotic earth power. What about the titans? Are they different?
They are distinct, yeah. They're the 12 direct children of Uranus and Gaia.
Let's see. Oceanus, Ceos, Creos, Hyperion, Iapetus, Cronus, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe.
That's them. They represent a sort of more ordered, maybe, but still immense power. Though some sources vary on the exact origins, that's the main list.
And this generation, this is where we get the first big power shift, right?
Yes, the overthrow of Uranus by Cronus.
Instigated by Gaia, his mother.
She encourages Cronus and his Titan brothers help him wound Uranus and basically take over.
And Uranus's last act is that curse, predicting Cronus will suffer the same fate.
It really sets the stage, doesn't it? This whole cycle of sons overthrowing fathers, it's a major theme.
A fundamental tension about power, succession.
Exactly. And the sources say Cronus, once he got power, actually turned on his Titan allies who didn't side with him. Sent them to Tartarus, apparently with some help from giants.
Which brings us to the second dynasty, Cronus and Rhea.
Cronus, who the Romans called Saturn, often associated with time.
Eternal duration, that kind of time.
That's how the sources frame it, yeah. Not time like ticking seconds, but vast stretches. And he marries his sister, Rhea.
Who's presented as a really important divinity herself.
Very much so. And their children. Well, they're the ones most people know, the Olympians.
3 sons, Aias, Poseidon, Zeus, and 3 daughters, Estia, Demeter, Hera.
That's the core group. But Cronus, because of his father's curse.
He's terrified of his own kids.
Exactly. The sources describe him as swallowing each child as it's born.
Just awful. Rhea must have been devastated.
Deep sorrow, yes. But just like Gaia helped Cronus.
Rhea saves Zeus.
She hides him away. Gives Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead.
Clever. So Zeus grows up in secret?
He does. And then the myths say he comes back and forces Cronus to, well, regurgitate his siblings.
Wow. That must have been quite a reunion.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
And this leads directly to the epic showdown.
The Titanomachy, war against the Titans.
Zeus and his siblings against Cronus and the Titans who stayed loyal to him. It's a generational war.
And Zeus needs some heavy hitters on his side.
Right. So he releases some of those beings Cronus had locked up. The Hecatomb chairs.
The 100-handers again.
And the Cyclops, too.
Ah, the one-eyed giants. Brontes, Steropes, Arges.
Yeah.
The sources give them names.
And credit them with forging Zeus's ultimate weapon.
His thunderbolts.
Exactly. Which were pretty crucial for his eventual victory. The war was apparently long, fierce, brutal.
But Zeus wins in the end.
He does. He banishes Cronus and most of the Titans down into Tartarus. They also deal with other threats later, like Typhon, this monster child of Gaia and Tartarus. But Zeus defeats him too.
So the Titans are out, Zeus is in charge, the Olympian dynasty begins.
Zeus, or Jupiter for the Romans, becomes the top god, the ruler of heaven and earth.
And his domain, according to the sources, is huge, not just king of the gods.
No, he controls the weather, storms, tempests. He's seen as embodying natural laws.
Lord of state life, too. And father of gods and men.
It's a really broad portfolio. It shows how central he was to the Greek understanding of, well, everything. Cosmos, society.
His power sounds immense. Shaking his aegis causes storms.
His aegis, yeah, that shield or cloak signifying divine power. And, of course, he has the thunderbolt.
He sounds imposing, majestic.
The descriptions mention flowing hair, large nose, but also kindly lips. So a mix of authority and maybe some benevolence.
And his symbols are iconic.
Yeah.
The eagle, the thunderbolts, oak leaves.
Right. And his worship was incredibly widespread.
That famous statue by Phidias at Olympia, the oracle at Dodona with the rustling oak leaves.
Where priests called the Selli interpreted his will. Recent digs found temple ruins there, even little lead plates with people's questions.
And the Romans fully embraced him as Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill.
Yeah, it shows his deep influence on both religious and political life across cultures.
Now, Zeus's relationships, they generate a lot of the famous myths, don't they? Especially with goddesses and mortal women.
They certainly do. His first wife, according to these sources, was Metis, goddess of wisdom.
And she had the gift of prophecy.
Yes, and she foretold that a child born to them would eventually overthrow Zeus.
Ah, there's that pattern again. So Zeus, he doesn't swallow the child, he swallows her.
He does, to prevent the prophecy. But it gives him this splitting headache.
Which leads Hephaestus to crack open his head.
And out springs Athene, fully grown, fully armed, letting out a war cry.
What a birth story. That's unique.
Absolutely. It highlights her wisdom and strength coming directly from Zeus. The sources stress she's a purely Greek concept, no real equivalent elsewhere.
Okay. Then there's Leto, pursued by a jealous Hera.
Relentlessly. Zeus helps her find sanctuary on the island of Delos, which was supposedly floating until he anchored it.
So she could give birth to Apollo and Artemis there?
Right. It's an example of Zeus offering protection, even while his affairs cause chaos. Some versions say he turned her into a quail to help her escape Hera first.
And his unions with mortal women. Danae visited as a shower of gold.
Yes, mother of Perseus.
Alcmene, mother of Heracles, where Zeus disguised himself as her husband.
Exactly. These myths often explain the divine parentage of major heroes. They blur that line between god and mortal.
Like Semele, mother of Dionysus, tricked by Hera into asking to see Zeus in his true form.
And was instantly consumed by his lightning. A tragic tale. Though Dionysus later rescues her from Hades.
And Io, turned into a cow.
A white heifer, yeah, to hide her from Hera. But Hera wasn't fooled. Sent Argus with his 100 eyes to watch her.
Until Hermes killed Argus.
Right. But then Hera sent a gadfly to torment the poor heifer, making her wander the whole world.
Until she reached Egypt, finally.
Yes, where she regained her form and gave birth to Epiphus, who became a king. It's a story that connects Greece and Egypt mythologically.
These stories about Zeus and his lovers, they really highlight the complexities, the consequences of divine power, divine relationships.
I absolutely do. Jealousy, fate, disguise, the gods' unpredictable nature.
It's all in there.
Even the nicer stories, like Philemon and Baucis being rewarded for hospitality, show Zeus interacting directly with mortals, testing their virtue. Or the opposite, like Lycaon, whose wickedness supposedly provoked the Great Flood.
Which brings us neatly to Hera, Juno to the Romans, Zeus's principal wife, queen of heaven.
Eldest daughter of Cronus and Rhea, described as Majestic, proud, regal, beautiful.
But she's mostly famous for, well, her jealousy.
It's definitely her defining trait in many myths, especially towards Zeus's lovers and their children, Io, Leto. And as we'll see, Heracles felt her wrath too.
And her resentment even kicks off the Trojan War, indirectly.
Through the judgment of Paris, yes. Eris, discord, tosses that golden apple for the fairest at a wedding Hera wasn't invited to.
Leading to the beauty contest between Hera, Athene, and Aphrodite.
Judged by Paris, Hera offers him vast power, huge kingdoms, showing her own ambition. But he chooses Aphrodite.
So Hera becomes an enemy of Troy. She sounds like stern, sometimes vengeful power.
She is. Her symbols, the diadem, veil, scepter, peacock, all emphasize that queenly status.
The peacock is particularly linked to her, right? Pulling her chariot.
Yes, often shown with peacocks. Sacrifices were made to her monthly. Dittany, poppy, lily were her flowers.
Okay, next up. Athene. Roman Minerva. Pallas Athene.
Goddess of wisdom, but also armed resistance. And the sources make a point of saying she's purely Greek.
Born from Zeus's head, fully armed. But the sources clarify something important about that armor.
Yes, it symbolized her unassailable purity and virtue. Not that she was primarily a goddess of war in the same way as Ares, who loves strife for its own sake. That's a crucial distinction.
That totally reframes her. She's about strategy, protection, order, not just fighting.
Exactly. Protecting the state, defending law and order, upholding the right. She supported the Greeks in the Trojan War, founded the Areopagus court.
And she was the patron goddess of Athens, wasn't she? The contest with Poseidon.
Right. He offered a salt spring or a horse, but she offered the olive tree symbol of peace, prosperity. Athens chose wisely.
Her attributes fit that image. The aegis, the helmet, the owl for wisdom, the olive tree.
She's also patron of arts and crafts, weaving, sculpture.
The story about her inventing the flute but ditching it because it made her face look funny.
Adds a touch of humanity. But then comes the contest with Arachne, the weaver.
Who challenged Athene's skill, and Athene didn't take it well.
No. She defeated Arachne, struck her. Arachne tried to hang herself, and Athene turned her into a spider. A stark reminder of the gods' intolerance for mortal hubris.
Definitely. And her worship alongside Jupiter and Juno in the Roman capital shows just how important she became beyond Greece.
Moving on to Themis, another daughter of Cronus and Rhea, also a wife of Zeus sometimes.
She seems less about big dramatic stories and more about principles.
That's exactly her role. She personifies divine law, justice, order, regulating morality, assemblies, hospitality rules, core Greek values.
Represented with the scales and sword of justice.
Right. Zeus often sought her counsel, highlighting her wisdom. She presided over rituals, ceremonies, had an oracle too. Her daughters by Zeus were the Horai, the seasons or hours, linked to order.
Okay, Demeter, Roman Ceres, goddess of agriculture, plenty.
Daughter of Cronus and Rhea. The sources mention that in very old myths, she kind of inherited Gaia's powers and worship.
That makes sense, linking her directly to the Earth's fertility.
Exactly. Sustainer of material life. And her most famous story.
Persephone. Her daughter, abducted by Hades.
Yes, this myth is absolutely central to understanding Greek views on seasons, life, death, rebirth.
Demeter's grief makes the earth barren. That's winter.
A powerful explanation. Her desperate search, helped by Helios the sun god and Hecate, her time disguised in Eleusis nursing Demophon. It shows the depth of her sorrow.
And the eventual compromise brokered by Zeus? Persephone spends part of the year below, part above.
Because she ate those pomegranate seeds in the underworld, binding her there partially. Her return signifies spring and summer, the earth reviving.
The source notes this likely started as an allegory, but became a core religious belief.
Yes, and it's the foundation for the Eleusinian mysteries.
Which taught moral lessons and, importantly, the immortality of the soul. That's huge.
It shows these myths weren't just stories. They held profound spiritual meaning. Her sacred animal being the sow makes sense agriculturally, too.
Okay, Aphrodite, Venus, goddess of beauty and love.
Her origin rising from the sea foam. It's just so iconic.
Very evocative. And her attendants, the Hora and Graces, always making her beautiful.
Emphasizes her connection to beauty, charm, allure. Her symbols, dove, swan, myrtle, classic symbols of love.
The story of Adonis is interesting, loved by both Aphrodite and Persephone.
Yes, leading to another cycle. Zeus decrees he splits his time. Adonis chooses to spend his free time with Aphrodite, but then he's killed by a boar.
Aphrodite's grief leads to another compromise, him spending half the year on Earth with her.
It's another myth explaining a natural cycle, but through love, death, and divine intervention, and it shows the goddess of love experiencing loss.
And the Romans adopted her as Venus, with festivals seeing her in different aspects, like Venus Cloacina, the purifier.
Shows how deities evolve. And that little note about Momus, the fault finder, not being able to criticize her perfect form.
It's a nice touch. Adds a bit of divine humor.
What about Helios, the sun god?
Driving his fiery chariot across the sky.
A direct personification of the sun. The ancient belief in his path being a curve reflects how they literally saw the sun move.
And the story of his son, Phaeton, trying to drive the chariot.
Disaster. He loses control, scorches the earth, sets things on fire. Seems like a clear cautionary tale.
About hubris. Inheriting power you can't handle.
Definitely seems that way. Only Zeus can stop the destruction by striking Phaeton down. The link to the Colossus of Rhodes representing Helios is fascinating too.
Like physically embodying the god in the landscape.
Right. And the contest with Poseidon for Rhodes, or the story of Eos asking for immortality for Tithonus but forgetting eternal youth.
Another poignant warning about the fine print when dealing with the gods.
Exactly. These myths are packed with lessons.
Okay, let's quickly cover a few other interesting deities mentioned. Hecate.
Often linked to magic, spells, crossroads, the moon. Maybe originally a moon goddess.
Yeah.
Associated with ghosts, apparitions.
Her descriptions sound pretty intense. Gigantic, torch, sword, snakes.
Yeah. Suggests a powerful, perhaps liminal figure connected to the edges of the world, or the boundary between life and death. Her helping Demeter search for Persephone links her to the underworld. Medea was her priestess.
Selene, the moon goddess, seems much gentler.
Yes, silver chariots, white horses, crescent moon, a calmer celestial presence. Her story with the sleeping shepherd Endymion is a classic.
Artemis, then, Diana. Apollo's twin, goddess of the hunt, wild animals.
Forests, hills, but also protector of young maidens, purity, chastity.
And she could be quite fierce about it, punishing those who broke vows.
Definitely a protector, but also an enforcer. Her symbols are the bow, quiver, spear, sacred animals, hind, dog, bear, boar.
The Caledonian boar hunt story, that starts because a king neglected her in sacrifices.
Meonius, yes. She set a monstrous boar to ravage his lands as punishment. Shows the gods demanded respect.
And that whole cycle involves Meleager, Atalanta, divine anger leading to human tragedy.
It does. And the mention of Taurian Artemis with human sacrifice, that reveals a darker, maybe older aspect of her worship.
Possibly linked to preserving that purity she represented in a brutal way.
Perhaps. And the Iphigenia story ties right into this. Artemis saves her from sacrifice at Aulis.
Only to make her a priestess in Torca, where she has to oversee those very rites.
It raises complex questions about divine mercy and its costs. And the Roman Diana, having a priest who had to kill the previous one, adds another layer of ritual violence.
Okay. Hephaestus. Vulcan, god of fire, the divine smith.
Son of Zeus and Hera. Importantly, god of beneficial fire, technology, craftsmanship, patron of metal workers.
And he's lame. An imperfection among the Olympians.
Yeah, often explained by being thrown from Olympus, either by Zeus for siding with Hera, or by Hera herself at birth because she thought he was ugly.
Ouch. But his skill was unmatched. Built palaces, armor for Achilles, even made Pandora.
Yes, and those fire-breathing bronze oxen for King Hades, the ingenious throne he made to trap Hera in revenge.
And Dionysus had to get him drunk to come back and release her.
Shows a bit of personality, doesn't it? More earthy. His teaching metalwork in Lemnos connects him directly to human arts.
Poseidon, Neptune, ruler of the sea, Zeus's brother.
Immense power over the oceans. His trident could cause earthquakes, raise islands, create springs. It symbolized the sea's raw, unpredictable force.
Also associated with horses and chariot races.
Yes, the power of waves often likened to horses. He lent Pelops his chariot. Patron of fishermen, worshipped along coasts, had a golden palace under the sea.
His children include Triton, the giant cyclops Polyphemus.
Right, and he ruled over other sea deities like Nereus and the Nereids, Proteus the shapeshifter.
And his contest with Athena for Athens, where his salt spring lost out to her olive tree.
Highlights that rivalry among the gods for human favor.
Ares, then, Mars, god of war, but different from Athene.
Very different. The sources emphasize he loved strife for its own sake. Raw aggression, bloodlust, chaos.
Generally disliked by the other gods, except maybe Aphrodite.
Seems so. He often represented something contrary to the ordered state life Athene protected. Getting wounded by a mortal, Diomedes, in the Trojan War, shows his limits.
But he was more important to the Romans as Mars.
Yes, much more central, linked directly to military might and state success. a significant cultural difference there.
Nike, goddess of victory.
Victoria for the Romans, often shown with Zeus or Athene, personifying success. Statues erected after victories.
Hermes, Mercury, the messenger god.
Swift-footed messenger, ambassador, conductor of souls to Hades, but also involved in education, gymnastics.
Invented the alphabet, languages. God of eloquence, patron of merchants and thieves. That's quite a mix.
It really reflects his role as a go-between, crossing boundaries. Between gods and mortals, life and death, even honesty and trickery.
Like the story of him stealing Apollo's cattle as a baby.
Exactly. Shows his cunning right from the start. He invents the lyre from a tortoise shell to smooth things over with Apollo.
And Apollo gives him the caduceus, that staff with the snakes.
Yes, the golden wand, symbol of his herald role, able to reconcile opposites. His attributes: winged cap, Perseus, winged sandals, Talaria. The caduceus emphasized speed and his role.
Sometimes shown with gold chains from his lips for eloquence or a purse for merchants.
A very versatile god. The statue by Praxiteles, Hermes, and the infant Bacchus is famously beautiful.
Dionysus, Bacchus, Liber for the Romans, god of wine, revelry, theater.
Son of Zeus and Semele, a very different kind of Olympian.
He brings viticulture, teaches mankind about wine, but also embodies a wilder, ecstatic worship.
Yes, his followers, men, women, fauns, satyrs, carrying the Theseus staff, clashing symbols. It represents breaking free from normal constraints. His female followers, the Manas or Bacchantes, in their frenzy, are a powerful image.
And those who opposed his worship, like Lycurgus or Pentheus,
met terrible ends. Pentheus spied on the Bacchantes and was torn apart by his own mother and aunts in their divine madness. Shows the danger of suppressing this force.
His festivals, the Dionysia, were huge deals, weren't they? Especially in Athens.
Absolutely. Yeah. Processions, games, and crucially, the performance of new tragedies and comedies. His worship is directly linked to the birth of Greek theater.
He even rescued his mother Semele from Hades.
Brought her to Olympus, where she became the goddess Thyone, and connects him to overcoming death. And the Midas story, the golden touch, shows his power to grant wishes, but also the classic "be careful what you wish for" theme. Midas judges against Apollo in a contest too.
Aedes, Pluto, Orcus, ruler of the underworld.
The youngest son of Cronus and Rhea, lord of Erebus, the realm of the dead and exiled gods.
His kingdom guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed dog. Lets souls in, but none out.
Right. The realm itself is divided. You have Grim Tartarus for the wicked, the Titans, giants like Otis and Ephialtes, and those famous sufferers.
Pythias, Tantalus, Sisyphus, Ixion, the Danaedes. Their eternal punishments are vivid warnings.
And then there's Elysium, a blissful region for the happy spirits. Balmy air, rippling brooks, a peaceful afterlife.
His symbols are fitting: chariot with black horses, the helmet of invisibility made by the Cyclops.
Reinforce his role as the unseen lord of the dead. And despite the grimness, he was universally worshipped. Death comes for everyone.
Sacrifices to him were distinct: 2 black sheep. At night, blood in a trench. Very chthonic.
Of course, he carried off Persephone to be his queen, linking the underworld to the world above. Orpheus and Heracles both visited his realm too.
The Erinyes, Furies, or Dirae.
Female deities embodying remorse, the pangs of a guilty conscience, born from Uranus's blood, perhaps embodying his curse.
Names like Alecto, Megara, Tisiphone, armed with daggers, scourges, torches, snakes.
Relentless pursuers, especially of those who kills family members, like Orestes, showing him his murdered mother in a mirror. Terrifying.
They're also called Eumenides, the well-meaning ones.
Yes, propitiatingly, out of fear. Later seen perhaps more positively as agents of justice on earth, working with the fates.
The Moirae, the fates, Porsae to the Romans.
Governed human destiny itself, assigned your lot at birth. Daughters of Zeus and Themis, or maybe Nyx.
Austere maidens, prophetic. Even the gods seemed to respect their power. They assisted with Persephone's return, attended births. The idea of the cur, individual destiny weighed, is interesting.
Suggests maybe fate wasn't always absolutely rigid in the earliest beliefs.
Hypnos, god of sleep. Somnus, brother of Thanatos, death.
Dwelling in a sunless, silent cave near the Cimmerians, River Lethe flowing nearby, carries a poppy stalk. Sleep and death are twins.
His children create dreams. Morpheus for human forms, Phantasis for objects, Phobetor for animals or monsters.
Explaining the different kinds of dreams people experience.
Taita, Fortuna, goddess of fortune, chance.
Winged, balancing on a ball or wheel, holding a rudder or cornucopia, symbols of luck's instability and bounty.
Her Roman version, Fortuna, sometimes shown without the wings or ball, just the cornucopia.
Suggests a shift toward seeing her more as good luck, maybe. They also had Felicitas for happiness, Anante, or necessitas, is mentioned as Teshe and another guise embodying inescapable necessity, immutable laws.
Momus, the fault finder, found fault with everyone but Aphrodite.
A bit of divine satire, yeah. Often depicted later as a jester.
And then the famous love story, Eros and Psyche.
Eros, first a primeval force of love, later Aphrodite's son, Cupid or Amor. The little story about him only growing when, with Anteros, requited love, is sweet.
But the main myth is Psyche, the mortal princess whose beauty rivaled Aphrodite's.
Leading Aphrodite to be jealous. The oracle of the unseen lover who is Eros, the jealous sisters, Psyche breaking the taboo.
Eros flees. Psyche has to endure impossible tasks set by Aphrodite to win him back.
Helped secretly by Eros, of course. The final task from Persephone, opening the box, falling into a death-like sleep.
Until Eros awakens her. He persuades Aphrodite to relent. Zeus grants Psyche immortality.
A beautiful allegory, really. The soul, Psyche united with love, Eros, after trials and suffering. Celebrated on Olympus.
Wow, that covers a lot of the major and minor deities. We also had mentions of Hebe, goddess of youth.
Cupbearer, until she stumbled, replaced by Ganymedes. Married Heracles after he became a god.
Ganymedes, the Trojan prince abducted by Zeus as an eagle.
Highlighting the god's desires sometimes overriding mortal lives. Zeus gave his father compensation, though magic horses.
The Muses, 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne memory.
Deities of arts, sciences, poetry, history, music, dance, astronomy. Led by Apollo, lived on Olympus, Helicon, Parnassus, haunted sacred springs.
Each muse had her domain right. Calliope for epic poetry, Clio for history, Melpomene for tragedy.
Thalia, comedy, Polyhymnia, sacred hymns, Erato, love poetry, Euterpe, lyric poetry music, Terpsichore dance, Urania, astronomy. Their contest with the Pleiades, where music moved a mountain, is classic. Pegasus created the Hippocrene spring, stopping it.
The Hesperides, guarding the golden apples in the far west.
Daughters of Atlas, guarded the tree Gaia gave Hera. Laodan the dragon helped. Heracles had to get the apples for one labor.
The Graces, Charites, personifying grace, beauty, favor, attendants of Aphrodite.
Often appeared with Apollo, Eros, the Muses, Horae.
The Horae, the seasons, daughters of Zeus and Themis, representing order, natural cycles.
Attendants of Zeus, opening heaven's gates. Also with Aphrodite, Apollo, the Muses, linked to justice through their mother Themis. Personified clouds, too.
Nymphs, deities of nature everywhere.
Beautiful, fairy-like spirits of woods, streams, mountains, meadows. Many types. Nereis in the sea, Naiads in freshwater, prophetic. Dryas in trees, life tied to the tree. Oreads on mountains, they connect the divine to the landscape.
Satyrs, companions of Dionysus and Pan, rural, wild figure.
And Pan himself, Roman Faunus, god of shepherds, flocks, rural life. Goat legs, horns, loved the nymph Syrinx.
Who turned into reeds, leading him to invent the panpipe, the syrinx.
Right. Protector of flocks, patron of huntsmen. Shepherds kept quiet at noon when he slept. Later linked with Dionysus. Had prophetic powers.
Aesculapius, god of healing, son of Apollo.
Taught by the centaur Chiron. His children Hygeia, health, and Panacea, all healing, were also revered.
Killed by Zeus for raising the dead, possibly. Crossing a boundary.
That's one version. Shows the limits even healing had. His worship came to Rome from Apollodorus during a plague. Temple on an island in the Tiber. Attributes: snake and staff.
And the sources briefly touched on purely Roman figures like Janus.
Two-faced god of gates, beginnings, transitions. Temple doors open in war, closed in peace.
Palatinus, Picus the woodpecker god, and the crucial Roman household gods, Lares and Penates.
Protecting the home and family, central to Roman daily life. Genius was the protecting spirit of the head of the family.
Beyond the gods themselves, the sources detailed worship practices, temples.
More than just worship sites. Could be monuments, tombs. Architectural styles often linked to the god Doric for Zeus, Ionic for Apollo, Corinthian for Hestia. Contained holy water, altars, statues.
Sacrifices were key, giving back to the gods.
Spotless animals. Specific ones for specific gods, so for Demeter, goat for Dionysus. Rituals involved salt, wine libations, frankincense.
Reading omens from the victim's behavior, the entrails, the flames. It was complex.
Aimed at appeasing anger, asking for success, fulfilling vows. Hecatombs were huge sacrifices of 100 animals.
Oracles like Delphi offered divine guidance.
Though often ambiguous, priests interpreted the prophecies. Soothsayers, augurs in Rome, read omens in dreams, bird flight, entrails. All ways to try and understand divine will.
And festivals were huge public events.
Processions, games, theater, the Eleusinian mysteries for Demeter and Persephone were particularly important, teaching about the afterlife, the soul's immortality. initiates war secrecy.
The Dionysia, celebrating the wine god, linked revelry directly to the birth of drama.
Greater Dionysia in spring with new plays, lesser in autumn for the vintage. Mystic rites for women too. Romans had Cerealia for Ceres, Vestelia for Vesta.
Okay, let's shift gears to the really action-packed stuff, the hero legends. These sources cover some major cycles. Cadmus first.
Right, founder of Thebes. Searching for his sister Europa, abducted by Zeus. Oracle tells him to follow a cow.
And build a city where it rests, Thebes. But then he has to kill a dragon.
The dragon's sacred to Ares. Athene tells him to sow its teeth.
And armed warriors spring up. They fight until only 5 are left, who help him build the city.
It's a myth explaining Thebes' origins, steeped in violence. He has to serve Ares for killing the dragon, but eventually marries Harmonia, Ares' daughter.
But that necklace Harmonia receives, it brings bad luck, doesn't it? Hints at future tragedy for the family line. Even their kids, Semele, Agave, suffer terrible fates. Cadmus himself ends up changed into a serpent.
A complex founding story. Then there's Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae.
Whose birth fulfills a prophecy threatening his grandfather, King Acrisius.
Acrisius tries to thwart fate by setting them adrift in a chest. But that just ensures the prophecy unfolds elsewhere. Perseus' quest for Medusa's head is the classic hero's journey.
Aided by Hermes and Athene, gets magical gear, winged sandals, helmet of invisibility, special wallet.
Has to trick the Graeae, the sisters sharing one eye and tooth, to find the nymphs who have the gear. Then flies off to face the Gorgons.
Kills Medusa using his shield as a mirror. Pegasus, the winged horse, springs from her blood. Iconic moment.
And on his way back, he finds Andromeda chained to a rock.
Sacrificed to a sea monster because her mother Cassiopeia boasted she was more beautiful than the Nereids. Hubris again.
Perseus defeats the monster, marries Andromeda, returns home, uses Medusa's head to turn the wicked King Polydectes to stone.
And then, despite trying to avoid it, he accidentally kills his grandfather Acrisius at some games with a discus.
Fate is inescapable. That's a powerful theme here.
Ion's story is different. Son of Apollo and a mortal princess, Crisa.
Exposed as a baby, rescued by Hermes, raised in Apollo's temple at Delphi, unaware of his parents.
Crisa marries someone else, Xuthus. They consult the oracle about children. Xuthus is told Ion is his son.
Crisa, thinking Xuthus was unfaithful, tries to poison Ion. It gets very dramatic.
Until Athene intervenes and reveals Ion's true divine parentage by Apollo.
Right. It's a story about hidden identities, divine plans, near tragedy, and ultimately reconciliation. It also serves to explain the mythological origins of the Ionian people.
Daedalus and Icarus, the master inventor.
Brilliant architect, sculptor. But jealousy drives him to kill his talented nephew, Talus. Shows a dark side.
He flees to Crete, works for King Minos, builds the labyrinth for the Minotaur.
Helps Ariadne and Theseus escape, so Minos imprisons him, which leads to the famous escape attempt.
With wings made of feathers and wax, Daedalus warns Icarus not to fly too high or too low.
But Icarus, caught up in the thrill, flies too near the sun. The wax melts. He chills into the sea, the Icarian Sea.
Such a powerful myth about ambition, limits, obeying wisdom. Daedalus makes it to Sicily, but Minos pursues him and gets killed by the daughters of the Sicilian king.
Daedalus represents peak human ingenuity, but also its dangers and consequences.
Okay, the Argonauts. Quest for the Golden Fleece. Huge ensemble cast of heroes.
Led by Jason. Sent on the quest by his uncle Peleus, who'd usurped the throne and feared Jason because of an oracle about a man with one sandal. Jason showed up wearing one.
So Peleus sends him on this impossible mission to Colchis to get the fleece from King Hades, hoping he won't come back.
Jason gathers all the top heroes, Heracles, Orpheus, Castor and Pollux, Theseus, Meleager, builds the ship Argo, guided by Athene. The journey is epic.
Lemnos, where the women killed all the men. Mysia, where Heracles loses his companion Hylas and gets left behind.
The Babrises, where Pollux wins a boxing match against their king. Bithynia, where they help the blind prophet Phineas tormented by the Harpies.
Phineas gives them crucial advice for the next stage, right? The Symplegades.
The clashing rocks, yeah. He tells them to send a dove through first. If it makes it, they can try.
The dove gets through, losing only tail feathers. The Argo rows like mad, just scrapes through as the rocks crash behind them, losing a bit of a stern. Then the rocks stop clashing forever.
Finally, they reach Colchis. King Hades isn't just going to hand over the fleece.
He sets Jason impossible tasks. Yoke fire-breathing bronze oxen.
Made by Hephaestus, no less. Then plow a field and sow dragon's teeth.
Which sprout into warriors, just like for Cadmus. And then overcome the sleepless dragon guarding the fleece.
Seems impossible. But this is where Medea comes in.
Aetes's daughter, priestess of Hecate, powerful sorceress, falls in love with Jason.
Hera and Aphrodite might have had a hand in that. She gives Jason magic potions and advice.
So he can handle the oxen, trick the Earthborn warriors into fighting each other by throwing a stone among them.
And put the dragon to sleep with Medea's potion. He grabs the fleece.
Then they have to flee, with Aeetes in hot pursuit.
And Medea does something truly horrific to help them escape. She kills her own younger brother, Absyrtus, cuts him up, and throws the pieces overboard.
To force Aeetes to stop and collect the remains, that's brutal.
It shows how far she'll go for Jason, but also foreshadows her capacity for violence. They eventually get back to Iolcus.
But Peleus still won't give up the throne.
So Medea takes revenge. She tricks Peleus' daughters into killing him, claiming she can restore his youth by boiling him in a cauldron she demonstrates with an old ram first.
They fall for it, kill their father. Jason and Medea are driven out for the regicide. The Argo ends up as a constellation. A dark end to that quest.
Very dark. Pelops is mentioned briefly too, son of Tantalus, the one served to the gods. Restored with an ivory shoulder.
He wins his wife Hippodamia in a chariot race against her father Eunomus.
By bribing the charioteer Merlus to sabotage Eunomus' chariot, Eunomus dies, Pelops wins, but then kills Myrtilus.
Who curses him and his descendants, setting up the whole tragic cycle of the House of Atreus. The source note about him maybe contesting Rhodes with Poseidon seems a bit out of place chronologically, showing how myths could vary.
Exactly. Now, Heracles, probably the most famous Greek hero.
Son of Zeus and Alcmene. Hera's jealousy starts even before his birth, making sure his cousin Eurystheus is born first and gets the promised kingship.
So Heracles is fated to serve Eurystheus. But even before that, Hera drives him mad.
And he kills his own wife Megara and their children. That's an incredibly dark start.
It is. The famous 12 labors are his penance, assigned by the oracle, carried out under Eurystheus. They're tests of strength, courage, ingenuity, and take him everywhere.
Nemean lion with impenetrable skin strangled it. Lernaean Hydra 9 heads cauterized the necks with help from his nephew Iolus.
Syrian hind, sacred to Artemis, hunted for a year. Erymanthian boar captured alive. Augean stables cleaned in a day by diverting rivers.
Stymphalian birds' bronze beaks drove them off with special castanets from Athene. Cretan bull brought it back live. Mares of Diomedes' flesh-eating horses fed their master to them.
Girdle of Hippolyte, the Amazon queen, involved a fight started by Hera's meddling. Oxen of Geryones from a three-bodied giant in the far west sailed in the sun's golden boat.
Apples of the Hesperides had to trick Atlas into getting them while Heracles held up the sky. Clever.
And finally, Cerberus bringing the three-headed guard dog of Hades back from the underworld without weapons. Terrified Eurystheus.
After the labors, he's free, but more tragedy follows. Kills Iphitus in another madness fit, has to serve Queen Omphale and Lydia.
Sacks Troy because King Laomedon cheated him after Heracles saved his daughter Hesine from a sea monster. Marries Deianira after wrestling a river god.
And his death. Caused by Deianira using poison blood from the Centaunessus. She thought it was a love charm.
The robe burns him terribly. He builds his own funeral pyre. But the gods make him immortal. He ascends to Olympus, marries Hebe, a rare apotheosis for a hero.
Bellerophon, another hero associated with Pegasus.
Son of Glaucus of Corinth, falsely accused by Queen Antea, sent to her father King Iobates with a sealed letter ordering his death.
Classic kill the messenger setup. Iobates gives him impossible tasks instead. Kill the chimera.
That lion goat serpent monster breathing fire. He gets help, maybe Poseidon or Athena, tames Pegasus with a magic bridle seen in a dream, and shoots the chimera from the air.
He also defeats the Solomons, fights the Amazons. Iobates keeps sending men against him, who all fail.
Eventually, Iobates realizes Bellerophon has divine favor, gives him his daughter and kingdom. But then
Bellerophon gets arrogant, tries to fly Pegasus to Olympus just to see what's there.
Zeus sends a gadfly. Pegasus throws him. He wanders the earth alone, crippled and cursed. A clear warning against hubris.
Theseus, the great hero of Athens, son of King Aegeus.
Left sword and sandals under a rock by his father, retrieves them when grown, chooses the dangerous land route to Athens to prove himself, like Heracles.
Cleans up the road, defeating famous robbers and monsters. Periphetes, Sinus the pine bender, the Crommyonian sow, Sciron who kicked people off cliffs, Cercyon the wrestler, Procrustes in his deadly bed.
Establishes himself as a protector and bringer of order. Arrives in Athens, nearly poisoned by Medea, who's with Aegeus now. But Aegeus recognizes the sword.
His most famous deed, volunteering as tribute for Crete to face the Minotaur.
Athens had to send youths and maidens every 9 years as prey for the Minotaur in the labyrinth, punishment for the death of Minos' son in Athens.
Theseus goes. Ariadne, Minos' daughter, falls for him, gives him the thread to navigate the labyrinth and a sword.
He kills the Minotaur, escapes with Ariadne and the other tributes, but then abandons Ariadne on Naxos. Dionysus finds her there.
And on his return voyage, he forgets the signal, forgets to change the black sail to white.
Aegis, watching from the cliffs, sees the black sail, assumes Theseus is dead, and throws himself into the sea, which is why it's called the Aegean Sea. Tragic irony.
Theseus becomes king, fights Amazons, marries their queen Hippolyte, joins the Caledonian boar hunt, the Argonauts, strong friendship with Perseus, king of the Lapiths.
He helps Perseus fight the centaurs when they try to crash his wedding, then agrees to help Perseus do something incredibly risky.
Try to abduct Persephone from the underworld. Hades traps them on enchanted chairs.
Heracles later manages to rescue Theseus, but not Perseus. Shows the limits even heroes face.
More tragedy later. His wife, Phaedra, Ariadne's sister, falsely accuses his son Hippolytus by the Amazon queen. Theseus curses Hippolytus.
Poseidon sends a sea monster. Hippolytus is killed. Phaedra hangs herself. Theseus learns the truth too late, just layer upon layer of suffering.
He rescues Helen of Sparta as a child with Perseus, but her brothers, the Dioscuri, attack Athens and take his mother prisoner. Eventually, he's exiled from Athens, seeks refuge on Skyros.
And King Lycomedes treacherously pushes him off a cliff. A rather ignominious end for such a great hero. His remains were later brought back to Athens.
Oedipus. That cycle is maybe the most famous exploration of inescapable fate.
Laius and Jocas of Thebes get the oracle. Their son will kill his father and marry his mother. They try to prevent it by exposing the baby.
But he's rescued, raised by the king and queen of Corinth, Polybus and Merope, thinking they're his parents. Here's a rumor he's adopted, goes to Delphi himself.
And gets the same horrifying prophecy. Thinking it refers to Polybus and Merope, he flees Corinth to avoid harming them.
Travels towards Thebes, gets into a dispute at a crossroads with an old man, kills him. Unknowingly fulfilling the first part of the prophecy, the old man was Laius.
Arrives at Thebes, finds it plagued by the Sphinx, solves her riddle.
What goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, 3 in the evening, man?
Right. The Sphinx kills herself. Oedipus is hailed as a hero, becomes king, and marries the widowed queen, Jocasta, his mother, fulfilling the second part.
They reign happily for years, have children, Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, Ismene, until a plague hits Thebes.
The oracle says it's because Laius's murderer lives unpunished among them. Oedipus vows to find the killer.
And through relentless investigation involving the prophet Tiresias and an old shepherd, the horrifying truth comes out.
Jocasta hangs herself. Oedipus blinds himself with her brooches, becomes an outcast, cared for by his daughter Antigone, dies eventually at Colonus near Athens. Utter tragedy.
And it doesn't end there. His sons, Eteocles and Polynices, fight over the throne.
Agreed to rule alternate years, but Eteocles refuses to step down. Polynices raises an army, the Seven, against Thebes.
Includes heroes like Adrastus, Tydeus, and Amphiaraus, the seer, who knew they'd fail, but was forced to go by his wife Eriphyle.
Who was bribed by Polynices with Harmonia's cursed necklace. That object keeps causing trouble.
The attack fails disastrously. All the leaders except Adrastus are killed. Eteocles and Polynices kill each other in single combat.
The new king, Creon, forbids burial of the attackers. Antigone defies him to bury Polynices and is executed for it. More tragedy piling up.
Then their sons, the Epigoni, come back 10 years later.
Yes, to avenge their fathers. This time, led by Alcmaeon, Amphiaraus' son, the oracle says they'll succeed. Thebes falls.
But Alcmaeon then kills his mother Eriphyle for sending his father to his death, pursued by the Furies for matricide.
Has to find land formed after the murder to be purified. Marries again. His new wife wants a necklace and veil. He gets killed trying to retrieve them. It just never ends.
The Heraclidae, Heracles' descendants, driven out of their homeland by Eurystheus,
seek refuge in Athens. Eurystheus attacks Athens. An oracle demands a sacrifice. Heracles' daughter, Macaria, volunteers. Athenians win. Eurystheus killed. The Heraclidae eventually invade the Peloponnesus and claim their birthright. It's about legacy and divine will over generations.
And finally, the biggest cycle of all, the Trojan War. Starts with the judgment of Paris.
And his abduction of Helen, wife of Menelaus of Sparta, with Aphrodite's help.
The Greek kings and heroes unite under Agamemnon, Menelaus' brother, to get her back and punish Troy. Heroes like Achilles, Odysseus, Ajax, Diomedes.
Odysseus tries to dodge the draft by feigning madness, but Palamedes exposes him. Achilles' mother Thetis hides him dressed as a girl on Scyros, but Odysseus finds him too.
Achilles, son of a goddess, dipped in the Styx except his heel, fated for a short, glorious life or a long, obscure one, trained by Chiron.
The fleet gathers at Aulis. Agamemnon offends Artemis, no wind. Oracle demands his daughter Iphigenia be sacrificed.
But Artemis swaps her for a deer at the last second, taking her to Taurica. The fleet sails, lands in Mysia by mistake, fight Telephus. Achilles wounds him.
Wound won't heal. Oracle says only the inflictor can heal it. Telephus goes to the Greeks, gets healed by rust from Achilles' spear, then guides them to Troy. Prophecy says first Greek ashore will die. Perseus takes the fall.
The siege lasts 10 years. Highlights include Achilles withdrawing in anger after Agamemnon takes his war prize. Briseis. Greeks suffer badly.
Agamemnon tries to apologize, offers huge gifts. Briseis back. Achilles refuses. Still angry.
His beloved friend Patroclus wears Achilles' armor to rally the Greeks, gets killed by the Trojan hero Hector.
That brings Achilles back into the fight, full of grief and rage. Gets new armor from Hephaestus, kills Hector, drags his body behind his chariot. Brutal. Holds magnificent funeral games for Patroclus.
Achilles himself is eventually killed. Shot in the heel by Paris, arrow guided by Apollo, his only weak spot.
Ajax and Odysseus compete for his divine armor. Odysseus wins through eloquence. Ajax goes mad with humiliation, kills sheep thinking they're Greek leaders, then kills himself.
The war drags on, until Odysseus comes up with the plan.
The wooden horse. Built by Epius, guided by Athene. Greek heroes hide inside. The main fleet pretends to sail away.
Trojans debate bringing it in. Laocoon, priest of Apollo, warns them, "Beware Greeks bearing gifts," throws a spear at it.
But Athene sends 2 sea serpents to kill Laocoon and his sons, making the Trojans think he offended the gods and the horse is sacred. Sinon, a Greek left behind, tells a convincing sob story.
So the Trojans pull the horse into the city, breaking down part of their wall to do it. Big mistake.
That night, Sinon lets the heroes out, signals the fleet. The Greeks return, sack the city. Troy falls.
The aftermath is just as important, Agamemnon's return.
Met by his wife Clytemnestra, who murders him in his bath. With help from her lover Aegisthus. Revenge for sacrificing Iphigenia, jealousy over Cassandra, Agamemnon's war prize.
His son Orestes has to avenge him, kills Clytemnestra and Aegisthus with his friend Pylades.
But then he's pursued by the Furies for matricide. The cycle continues. Oracle tells him to fetch the statue of Artemis from Taurica,
where he finds his long-lost sister Iphigenia. They escape together with the statue. The Furies still pursue him, but Athene intervenes, sets up a trial in Athens. Orestes is acquitted, finally breaks that cycle of violence, becomes king.
And Odysseus. His return journey takes another 10 years, the Odyssey.
Encounters with the Cicones, the Lotus Eaters, then the Cyclops Polyphemus.
Son of Poseidon. Odysseus blinds him after tricking him. Nobody is my name. Escapes under the sheep. But Polyphemus curses him, asking Poseidon for vengeance. That causes many problems.
Island of Aeolus, king of the winds, gets a bag of winds, but his crew opens it. Blown way off course.
Laestrygonians, cannibal giants, destroy most of his ships. Island of Aea, the enchantress Circe, turns his men into pigs.
Hermes gives Odysseus the Molly plan as an antidote. He resists Circe. She restores his men. They stay a year.
Journey to the underworld to consult the prophet Tiresias. Sees shades of the dead, his mother, Agamemnon, Achilles, who famously says he'd rather be a living slave than king of the dead. Ajax, still sulking about the armor.
Past the sirens, Odysseus tied to the mast, crew's ears plugged. Between Scylla, 6-headed monster, and Charybdis, whirlpool, loses 6 men to Scylla.
Island of Helios, his men eat the sacred sun cattle against warnings. Zeus sends a storm, destroys the ship. Only Odysseus survives.
Washes ashore on the island of the nymph Calypso. She keeps him for 7 years. Zeus finally sends Hermes to order his release.
Builds a raft. Poseidon smashes it. Washes ashore in Phaeacia. Helped by Princess Nausicaa and her parents, King Alcinous and Queen Arete, they finally sail him home to Ithaca.
Arrives after 20 years. Disguised by Athena as a beggar. Meets his son Telemachus, who's been searching for him. Loyal swineherd Eumaeus. Recognizes his old dog Argus, who dies upon seeing him. Nurse Euryclea recognizes him by a scar.
Finds his palace overrun with suitors trying to marry his wife Penelope, consuming his wealth. Penelope has been stalling them, weaving and unweaving a shroud.
She sets up an archery contest. String Odysseus' famously difficult bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. None of the suitors can even string it.
Odysseus, still disguised as the beggar, asks for a try. Strings it easily, makes the shot.
Then he reveals himself. With Telemachus and loyal servants, he kills all the suitors in a bloody battle in the hall, punishes disloyal
The
servants.
Penelope tests him one last time, asking about their unmovable bed before she fully accepts it's him. Reunited. He reunites with his aged father, Laertes.
Suitors' families try to attack, but Athene intervenes again to establish peace. Odysseus reigns again. What a journey. So, after traveling through all of that, what does this incredible collection of myths, drawn from your sources, really tell us?
Well, we've seen the universe born from, primal forces. Dynasties rising and falling through conflict prophecy.
Powerful gods meddling in everything, heroes facing insane tasks, dealing with fate, their own flaws.
Exactly. And these aren't just like old fantasy stories. They show the ancient Greeks wrestling with huge questions.
Where did we come from? What's our place? How do we explain storms, seasons, love, death?
What is justice? What's fate versus free will? How do we handle suffering? The consequences of actions, both ours and the gods.
They use these stories to make sense of their world, build their identity, reinforce values. We saw that in the worship, the lessons in the hero tales.
Yeah, their art, their temples, their understanding of law.
Yeah.
It's all tied up in these myths. And the echoes are still around today, in language, in art.
This deep dive really shows a civilization trying to understand itself in a universe filled with powerful, often unpredictable divine forces.
It absolutely does. A rich, complex tapestry.
Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Given how many of these stories, from Clonus swallowing his kids right through to the endless cycles of revenge in those heroic sagas.
Yeah, so much generational conflict, curses, inescapable consequences.
Right. What does this recurring pattern suggest about the ancient Greek outlook on, say, free will, and maybe the potential for real escape or forgiveness within that framework of fate?